All right, stand by, and all right, guys, we are live on YouTube, Tactical Podcast number 68. We're here today with Kevin Barrington. Kevin is a current tactical driving instructor over at BSR in West Virginia. Kevin has a really interesting background. So real quick, guys, Kevin started off his tactical career as an Air Force security officer or Air Force Security Forces. And from there, went into law enforcement. Now, in law enforcement, Kevin did a lot of really cool stuff, everything from narcotics to working his way up to being a ship supervisor. I think, Kevin, you retired at rank of sergeant, am I right?
Second lieutenant.
Second lieutenant, okay, awesome. And he's, done a bunch of stuff with them. He was also a driving instructor in the police service and did some work with the civil disturbance unit. Kev, you were involved with President Bush's first inauguration, which is pretty cool, man. But I want to ask you, first of all, thank you for coming on, bro. Very, very awesome to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Hope you stayed healthy and everybody else that's out there watching stayed healthy. So appreciate it.
So, guys, Kevin and I met because I think you all know I took Jen over to BSR to get her trained in evasive driving. We spent about a week over there. We did the evasive driving course, the off-road driving course, which Kevin was also our instructor for, and then we did some shooting. BSR is one of the better facilities out there. They train a number of organizations, and I'll leave it at that. But it was really fun. So, Kev, I want to first kind of ask you about tactical driving or evasive driving, just to get the viewers an idea of what it is that you guys do and that you teach. Can you kind of give us an overview about what that 3-day course kind of involves and what your role in teaching individuals evasive driving is?
Yeah, so I believe you took the evasive driving course, the 3-day course that you're talking about. The first day of it spent learning how to detect surveillance, see if you're being tailed. I know that it's not something that maybe the average person thinks is important, but you never know if you have, families and things like that. There's all kinds of nuts in the world that you never know if you're, if you're being watched or whatnot, But we teach you how to detect that and actually go out and do a little practical exercise with that. And then the next 2 days are spent learning the vehicle dynamics of a car, teach you how to brake properly, absent all these fancy stuff on these cars today, with the traction control, anti-lock brakes. We take all that out and let you go back to like it was in the 1970s, learn how to drive how you're supposed to, and then when you teach you some line theory, go out and go fast. And then I don't know, depending on what part of the country you live in, sometimes, you get in that close proximity where we're getting nice and tight to the cars. And I don't know, man, like 495, it comes in handy on 495 when you're having to weave your way through traffic and whatnot. So, and then we teach you how to do barricade breach. You never know when, especially today's world, you never know when you're going to have to ram a car to get it out of your way to keep on going, for the crazies in the world, man. You never know when you're going to get yourself blocked in, man. You got to get out. So, but yeah, it's basically, we teach you how to handle the car in the correct way safely.
Yeah, you guys are teaching James Bond techniques over there, man, all the chase turns and crazy stuff. And I'm glad you brought that up, that in today's world, you never know when you're going to need something like this, because it's true, man. Like, if you look at the way the world was, even like pre-pandemic, we were chilling, dude. And things were pretty good. And then all of a sudden, like, rapidly, it just plummeted. And the personal safety, personal security has become kind of paramount. Where do you think the world's headed from here, dude? Do you think that more and more average civilians like myself are going to kind of start looking at training like this?
I would hope so. I mean, just for self-preservation. I mean, if and those that do are going to be well ahead of the game when things go south. And I don't want to sound like a doomsdayer, but I think people need to be ready. Be it from we've already seen the stuff with the gas shortages here in the Mid-Atlantic, where all that happened, and the fights at the gas stations and things like that. People losing their mind, putting gas in plastic bags and whatnot. So be a smart one, prepare yourself and be ready for it, man. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
No, I think you're absolutely on point with that, man. It's just be smart and be ready for it, and obviously BSR it's an expensive training course, and there's a number of courses out there that guys and girls can take, not simply with the evasive driving, but medical, shooting, self-defense, everything like that. But I'm really glad to see that the training industry is kind of exploding, so to speak, right now. And it seems to happen, and I don't want to get political here, but it seems to happen every time a Democrat takes office. More and more tactical training schools do better. It just seems to be the way of things. But I also think it really has something to do with people realizing kind of the paint is on the wall and it's drying, so to speak. And I don't want to be a doomsday either, but like you said, all you have to do is take a look at the way the world's going. And I'm not saying it's going to collapse completely, but it's gotten more dangerous out there. I took Jen out there to train because we were out in Vegas, and some organization tried to carjack us. They actually pulled out and did a blockade on us, and I was actually able to just go around them real quick, just because that was my instinct from having done this. I didn't have to ram them or anything. But I don't think that's an uncommon thing to happen these days. I mean, they try to jack you up, financially, for your car, for whatever. If there's an opportunity they see, they'll take it. How do you think that training in this type of thing, I mean, differs from like self-defense? Like, I go to a Krav Maga class 3 days a week. I go shooting on the weekend. Why do I need to learn, counter surveillance or surveillance detection? Why do I need to learn how to, bootleg turn a car? I mean,
well, think about it. I mean, how much time do you spend in your car every day? And like in the police world, we talked about, we go shooting, a number of times each year because the state mandated it, but there was no, how to put it? There was nothing that said that we had to go and train in our police car, and that is we're driving a police car every single day. So there was nothing that said we had to receive an X number of hours of training in the police car. But yet we had to have, which we had to have training shooting our gun, which, some officers never do in their career, but they drive every day. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that, hey, you're in it every day, know what to do and know what you can do with it.
Yeah. Well put. Yeah. You were actually a police driving instructor, man. So yeah. I assume you were teaching, what would that have been? EVOC or something like that?
Yeah, EVOC, Emergency Vehicle Operations course. Yeah.
How does that differ from what you teach now?
It really doesn't. There's really not much difference. I mean, it's longer, like when we do our basic police recruits, they get 2 full weeks out there. So what you got this little taste of it in one day, but they do that repetitively, during those 2 weeks. We go a little bit more high speed with them more often because we have to have, they have an emergency vehicle operations course that they have to pass under a certain time. So without making mistakes and stuff, we grade them on early apex, late apex, jerky steering, erratic braking, that type of thing. If they cross over a double yellow line at anywhere during the thing, they automatically fail. So it's driven home. I mean, the stuff they receive in our police academy is top notch. I mean, it's like it's by 2 weeks I know they're probably getting sick of driving by then. So, but yeah, same thing. They learned the 4 corners of the cruiser. Same thing with we have we disabled the ABS system on it, so they'll, they get used to braking properly and things like that. So same thing that you went through, they get.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. How good a cop really has to be at driving. I mean, you mentioned they do it every single day that they're working, and it's so important. I mean, you see them flying around all over the place, and it really it makes you feel good that these guys get some training in actually going fast. Because I know some of the other emergency services, they don't get very much. Maybe an 8-hour course, right? Depending on what fire or EMS, but the cops are really they're solid for the most part, man. It's cool.
Yeah,
And I've talked with a few other guys who have done police instructing courses, and they say you've got to really be on point at backing and all of that stuff as well.
absolutely. Yeah. So back in the day when I went through, I actually learned out at Summit Point. That was we didn't have the police department didn't have their own driving facility, and we went to Summit Point to do a drive, and it was a little different because we only had 5 days of driving, 5 days of shooting, and 5 days of first aid. Back when I went through, and they lengthened it over time, and then to make it 2 weeks. And we were introduced to the backing courses or to the cone courses. We had to do like 4 different cone courses. There was a descending backing course where it like almost like a seashell. It got getting tighter in. It was a bear. We were introduced to it that morning and had to test that afternoon. Had an offset alley we had to go through, and the offset alley was only like 3 or 4 inches to spare on either side of the car where the cones were. And then there was a backing where you had to do emergency Y turn. So later on, we just encompassed all those. We had to parallel park also. We encompassed all those in one cone course for our recruits. So they had to do an offset alley, had to parallel park, had to back up. So we did it all in one course. So it's challenging. That's where we lost. We would lose a lot of people because not everybody can drive and not everybody can shoot. And so we always had that at the beginning of the academy, so we know if they have those problems, they get washed out at the beginning and not at the end.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't want to spend too much time right up front talking about driving.
Sure.
I know we're going to circle back to this, but I do want to ask one more thing about it real quick before we come back. Is if guys out there are looking to do some driving and they don't have the moolah to put up right up front for taking a course, is there anything they could do kind of on their own in a parking lot or something that you could think of that would aid them in developing more of their driver abilities?
Well, absent of having somebody that has some knowledge, if I would say yes, if they knew somebody that had been an instructor or they could get out and ride right seat and
Right.
and they could drive and their buddy, if you will, could critique them and tell them what to do. Yeah, but you can, if you find a nice parking lot, you can get out and maybe set up some cones and do a serpentine, go through. But I think you probably would have to have a little bit of training so you don't reinforce bad habits. If you're going to try to go out there by yourself, you don't want to go out there and just waste your time and keep doing the same thing and making the same mistakes, because it's just going to, it's going to be muscle memory at that point. So, I think you're probably old enough to know that, when the snow's coming, you get out into the parking lot, you want to go do some donuts, you can go do some vehicle recoveries out there in the snow, as long as the police aren't around, right?
Yeah. We got one guy in here asking, Kev, is a pit maneuver deadly force?
I guess it all depends on where you live and what your jurisdiction. But no, it wasn't for us, and so I'll just give you one instance where you can stop me if I'm getting ahead of myself. But we had one when I was the supervisor of our driving facility. We had a case where an officer went in pursuit on a major interstate in this DC area, and it was pre-rush hours, about 3:30. Had rained. He knew he had to get the pursuit stopped before it got into where rush hour traffic was already starting to back up. So he pitted this person at I don't know. I'm going to estimate probably 80 miles an hour. He pitted him, and beautiful pit. I saw the video. Beautiful pit. And if it wasn't for the 2-foot incline off the side of the road or decline off the side of the road, it would have been beautiful. But the car barrel rolled into a light post and didn't kill anybody, but passenger was injured, or the driver was injured. Passenger wasn't. Passenger was wearing a seatbelt. Driver wasn't. But I'll fast forward. I had my phone was blowing off the hook right after it happened because they wanted to know what we trained. You know, some of our, I'm throwing my department under the bus, but some of them didn't even know what we trained. And you know, it's what's the high speed you can do it at? I was like, there is no cap on it, as long as you have enough runoff room and whatnot. And then they were talking about how later on they start talking about they were going to do away with pit because it was too dangerous. And I'm like, no, you're not getting it right. The pursuit is dangerous. The pit is used to stop the dangerous pursuit. So it is, you understand what I'm saying? So it was like, and then the person from internal affairs was like, you're right. You know, like, hey, that's why we have it. We have it there to stop it. And some places in like, I want to say Alabama, or it was one of the southern states there. We talked, because I would talk to all the trainers throughout the country, and they mandated, it says in their general orders that they shall pit at the beginning of a pursuit to keep it, instead of letting the pursuit get going and stuff. So if they have an opportunity to pit the person at the very, first minute or two of that pursuit, they better do it. So
am I correct in saying that the pit was invented over at Summit Point?
So it actually came from overseas, and then our police department took it, and we developed it where we could use it in the police field. Okay. So we were the ones kind of like, that were credited for the invention of it for the police world, if you will. And it just happens we trained out there at Summit Point. That's how they took it out there and did all the studies on it and whatnot. So, yeah.
Man, we could talk about driving like the whole podcast, and I'm sure everyone would love it. But I want to circle back on that later. But man, you have really an interesting, the way that you got into this. We were talking about it while we were doing some driving. Your time with the Air Force Security Forces.
Right. How
did you decide that you wanted to get in to the security forces versus doing some other MOS or did you know you wanted to go law enforcement before you went in the Air Force?
Yeah, I did. My dad, I was third generation, or I ended up being third generation. My dad and his dad were police officers. And, somewhere around my junior year of high school, I think I decided that it interested me, and kind of saw what my dad was doing. I was like, hey, this is cool stuff. And so I joined the Air Force. I knew that if I didn't want to go to college, because if I went to college, I was going to go for the wrong reasons. I was going to go to party and whatnot. So, and it was my view at the time that I think every young man should serve his country. So I went ahead and enlisted. But back in the day, security, we were called security police back then. And we had security police and we had law enforcement. So it was two different. We basically, in security police, were responsible for our nation's priority weapons, airplanes, weapon systems, radar sites, and things like that. Law enforcement did just that. They worked base control, entry control to the base, and they responded to, like all the domestics and things like that, regular police duties on base, while we basically we were the grunts of the Air Force, I guess, if you will. So,
so which one were you? You were the law enforcement side?
Yeah, no, I was security police. Yeah. But so we were kind of like, when I say we were like the Army of the Air Force. So we had, air base ground defense training and things like that. Yeah, we spent many cold nights out looking at an airplane. So
that's always fascinated me, man. I mean, just the fact that you got, 18, 19-year-old kids, and these guys are walking around protecting our nuclear weapons and stuff like that. It's really cool. What would you say that your time working in the security services for the Air Force, How do you think that prepared you for your career in law enforcement?
Well, it's definitely definitely the military in general. I mean, it was, when law enforcement is a paramilitary organization. So, got me disciplined right away. Obviously, working in the field that I worked in, got used to some weapon systems with the rifles and the pistols and things like that. So, it got me from that aspect. It got me going. It didn't really prepare me for anything that I learned in the police academy, as far as how to deal with people, different situations I'd run into. Completely two different things, Yeah. The mechanics, if you will, that the Air Force taught me worked over into to law enforcement, but the little integral parts about how to deal with people was completely different. So,
what do you think the hardest part about standing a guard shift or guard duty is, especially at night? I mean, does it take some mental games to get you through some of that sometimes?
Oh, absolutely, man. I can't tell you how many times you're just, on an 8-hour school, we worked 8-hour shifts. It was like, man, this is dragging on, and you get reliefs every 3-4 hours. They'll come by and give you a relief. But yeah, we would do quality control exercises. The flight line, the flight commander or the shift commander would sometimes call an exercise, and then kind of make the night go by quick. So you had to actually have to act as if we're taking on a threat. So it's pretty cool. It's kind of like a live version of a tabletop exercise. Where they keep interjecting stuff. And you gotta it's like a fluid motion. You got to keep working at it. So yeah,
you guys
just because you got to have that mindset of like, hey, you can't get complacent and try to catch some Z's or anything like that, because you never know when they're going to pop off one of those exercises. So.
Well, I mean, especially, you guys are guarding some sensitive equipment, whether that's in, freaking $1 million airplanes or whatever it is that you're going. I mean, you got to think at some point something actually could happen, right? So.
Yeah, and I actually, I'll share this with you. It actually did happen after I left. I got out July, end of July of 1990, and then October of 90, they actually had a group come on and penetrated our alert area where the B-52s were. I just so happened to wear a B-52 shirt today. So, yes, and they went in and did some damage to the airplanes. They went out and I'm not sure if it was the Plaisir 7 that did it, because it was like they did that once before right before I got to the base. I was at Griffiths Air Force Base in New York. It's been decommissioned now, but might be worth if some viewers wanted to read about it, and they might be able to find some articles about it. It was in October of 1990. Yeah, they kind of embarrassing how it happened, but
was that like an anti-war group or something like that?
Yeah, they were pretty active in the area, because we had the B-52s there, and they would have monthly demonstrations at the gate, one of the entry gates, and they would throw goat's blood and stuff on the in front of the road and at the guard shack there. And it was just just a nuisance to deal with, but we obviously with that, we knew that, hey, at any given time these guys could try to sneak on and do some damage.
And were you guys permitted to use deadly force against something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what kind of boggles me, is that those guys didn't use it that night. They used restraint. They actually were on, they were in the alert area with hammers and stuff, beating on the planes and on the weapon systems there. And we had, deadly force was authorized once they entered into one special section there, and nobody did it though. So
it shows you. It shows you the level of commitment that the young men and women have. I mean, they knew that these were American civilians. They didn't want to shoot them to kill them. So
yeah,
Now you had a kind of cool story about your time getting out of the Air Force and into the police academy. It was kind of a short period of time that you had to actually transition over, if I'm correct, right?
Right. Yeah, it was like less than a week, I guess. I got out July 31st, I think it was, and I started the police academy August 6th. So I had really no time to decompress or go relax. But looking back, I'm glad I had it like that, because I was in the correct mindset going from one to the other.
Yeah, I'm sure it made your time in the police academy a lot easier than most civilians just transitioning from, the civvy world into the police academy. It probably made you a lot sharper.
Yeah. So I was, for one, I went in shape. I was, I was in really good shape back then, and I found the physical strain of the police academy was nothing like what I did in the Air Force. As I found it kind of boring. We were like, I mean, we were running every other day, but our lifting program wasn't not much to speak of. And I was lifting weights in the Air Force on my own, and I actually found my muscle definition to decrease when I was in the police academy, because we weren't doing enough of it. We're running a lot, but but being in that paramilitary, or being in that military mindset, I was fully prepared to take ass chewings where I saw some other people fold, and funny story. I had my ear pierced in 1985, and I maybe had it in my ear for maybe a week, and my dad kind of shamed me and called me some names and whatnot. So I took it out, and but that hole was there for the longest time. And when we had open ranks inspections, I think maybe the second or third day of the police academy, one of the instructors says, "I bet you I find somebody that had their ear pierced within the first two ranks, right?" I was in the first row, and sure enough, man, he came down. He goes, "We have a winner," and man, and I hadn't had that thing in what, 85 to 90. It had been on 5 years, but you could still see where it, had been in my ear. So
they don't give you guys an inch, do they?
No. Back then, I realized that the first day they were just trying to make examples out of people, but I found the police academy that, like I said, it measured up nothing like basic training. It was,
I had a similar experience when I went through the fire academy, man. I had just gotten out of a bunch of contractor training. I was, fitting to go overseas and do some stuff over there. Never made it. Instead, ended up getting in the fire service. And man, it was nothing compared to everything that I had gone through before, as far as PT and just the psychological aspect of it. Very easy. But I can only imagine how you felt actually coming out of 4 years in the Air Force security and then getting into the police service, man. Like it's a lot I think it's a lot more paramilitary probably than the fire service, but it's interesting that you still felt that it was not as hardcore.
No, not at all. And so it was about probably 60 to maybe 70% of the people I went through the academy with had prior military, unlike today where it's probably less than that. Most people have college now. Right? Mm-hmm. So I found that the people with, had gone straight from college out. Those are the ones that struggle a little bit, because this would be the first time that maybe somebody's jumped on their case, and so those of us that have been through it were like, hey, play the game, just you got to do this, and kind of help them get through those rough spots and stuff.
So here you are. You're how old at this point? Going through
sweet. This is 22.
Okay, so you're 22, fresh out of the military, week of transition time into the police academy, learning all this stuff. How much stuff from the military security services actually transferred over as far as your training? You said not a lot, but I imagine some of the shooting and probably some of the hand-to-hand did.
Yeah, so like I said, the technical stuff, the weapon systems, the just the plain discipline. That all, we didn't have much hand-to-hand stuff in the Air Force, believe it or not. We didn't do much. We didn't do much of that stuff. But knowing how to use the weapon, some of the terminology, it all, that was easily transferred over.
But how about some of the medical training? Did you get any medical training in the Air Force?
Oh, we did. Yeah, obviously. Yeah, but pretty much like what we got in the in the police academy also, your basic medical stuff.
Yeah.
Tourniquets and, regular first aid stuff, the ABCs of rescuing people. So.
And then you got out of the police academy, you went to work, and you did patrol for a while, correct?
I did, yes. Yeah.
And eventually transitioned into the narcotics unit. Am I correct?
Right. Well, my first 8 years, regular patrol officer.
Okay.
And then I did 4 years of what we call neighborhood patrol unit. It was a bicycle. I was on mountain bikes,
Okay.
patrolling some of our bad areas, probably one of the best jobs in the police department, where you get exercise and get to basically be outside all day, and get to make some great cases. I did that for 4 years, and that kind of led me into narcotics because I made so many narcotics arrests. You get your name known, and they're interested in you, and come recruiting you, if you will. So went to narcotics, spent 3 years there, and got promoted out as a sergeant, and went back to the street. So yeah,
we're seeing right now like an explosion of fentanyl related deaths and overdoses. I mean, no surprise after the last couple of years that we've had. Was it that way when you were working narcotics as well? Was there a lot of heroin going around? What was their drug of choice?
No, man. So heroin hadn't made it yet, but the synthetic opioids had, like Oxycontin. We actually had a couple officers that were working just the pain clinics in Virginia, and they were going and going throughout the state, because down in southwestern part of Virginia is where they call it hillbilly heroin there, because that's where it all was coming from, or a lot of it was coming. Actually, a lot of it was coming from Florida, and coming up the interstates to and landing in places like like Bristol and Abingdon, Virginia, and places like that. But we had a couple guys that went chase doctors and actually locked quite a few doctors up, and because they were just writing scripts for people. And and it's funny how it's probably part of the problem with the world today is that doctors get kickbacks for the amount of pharmaceuticals that they sell, and it's crazy. That could be a whole different podcast there, because it's just it's mind-boggling that that's the way the system's set up, and to keep people sick. And but anyway, going back to your question, the big ecstasy was huge when I first hit the streets and narcotics. So, and of course, weed was, marijuana was so prevalent, but it wasn't the marijuana that your mom and dad smoked back in the 70s. I mean, this was some high grade stuff, because in some places like DC couldn't get marijuana there. They had all the cocaine that you could get your hands on, but they couldn't get marijuana over there. So, I had a funny story about doing a drug deal with a guy over in DC, and he wanted some of the marijuana that come from Northern Virginia to take back over there, and he was going to bring me some cocaine from DC. And but we did one deal where basically a pound of marijuana was basically going for the same price that the same weight of cocaine was going for.
Damn. Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, I don't even know what it's going for now. I hate with it being decriminalized and stuff in the state right now. I don't know what it did to the prices, but there's always going to be that black market too. So.
Yeah, no, I think that the black market is still really there for the weed, man. It's because I think they're still trying to get around the taxes, So
I mean, you think about it. I mean, that's what I argued all along. I mean, these I would tell the kids on the street, because they'd be like, hey, it's going to be legal someday anyway. And I argued with them, well, what would you rather do? Would you rather pay the government's prices for marijuana, or would you rather buy it from the dude on the corner, and you may get higher quality stuff on the from the dude on the corner? You may not know what you're getting in it, unlike the government's weed, but that's a risk they have to take, though, I guess, So
a lot of people say like, oh, it's just weed, like it's just a plant, like it's no thing. But dude, like even compared to now to when you and I were growing up, and I realize we're slightly different generations, but dude, it just keeps getting more potent and powerful. And I really feel like the effect like this stuff the kids are smoking now, it's like straight up drugs, man. It actually like it actually messes with their brain quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, and of course, as if the potency of the marijuana is high enough, if that, it's got so that's not good enough for them. Now they found ways to extract the pure THC out of it, and dab, if you will.
Yeah.
And so it's like they're always finding ways to improve their high, and it's frustrating. And no matter, in this legalization of it, I don't know when it's going to stop. Now it's marijuana. What are they going to do with heroin? In some places in the Northwest, they already decriminalized certain Schedule 1 and 2 drugs. Like meth and PCP and things like that. You can personally possess a certain amount of it with impunity. And I'm like, this is crazy. And I just think, going back to my conspiracy theory, if you will, I think that's the way the government wants it. They want people to stay high and doped up, and because it makes them money. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100% on that, man. And I think a lot of people are.
Yeah, the drug subculture, man. It was like, I when I took my process, one of the questions were, why did I want to become a narcotics officer? And I said, well, because it nearly broke my family up. I had an older brother that was strung out on it, and I saw some things that, I was a 5-6-year-old kid that I probably shouldn't have seen, with abuse from, my mother and things like that my brother did. And, I said, it nearly broke it up. And I said, if I could do my part in keeping that from happening to somebody else, that's what I want. And, basically, and I wanted to keep it away from affecting my kids. I had started having a young family and things, and I didn't want it in their, I didn't want it in their world, so.
Yeah, good man, dude. I mean, drugs are a hell of a thing, man, and it really does ruin people. It ruins families, it ruins people, it ruins civilization, as far as I'm concerned. But did you do? Actually, I do want to circle back to that theory that you have, but in the right way at the right time. Let me ask you this: did you do a lot of undercover work in the narcotics?
Yeah, it was all undercover.
Okay.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about, like, for guys out there who are interested in the whole gray man thing, right? Like, what can you tell us as far as how you were able to kind of sneak around and, play a drug dealer, play a drug addict, whatever it may be? How do you think we can take a lesson from that, from the guys who really do it, and bring it to that whole gray man theory?
Well, let me say, I get this straight. You want to know how I pulled it off as being an undercover dude?
Yeah. I guess what I would want to ask is, what lessons did you learn about, fitting in, blending in, all of that type of stuff when you were doing undercover?
Well, I know this. I know people are greedy. That's number one. People are greedy. We all have senses, and they don't listen to their senses, right? Here I am. I was in my mid-30s, so I'm much older than most of the narcs. Most of them were the young guys that just came on. They could fit into that. But what I also learned was there was no like a drug dealer didn't look one specific way, because I found that most of the people that sold drugs came in different sizes, shapes, colors, and things like that. You just couldn't pick one out. So that's how I think I fit in, because the consumers are the same way, man. They're not just one specific, type of person. Addicts come in all forms. So when I was dealing with younger guys, they would say, hey, when we would get them and flip them, if you will, flip them being the effect, see if they want to work their charges off. They're like, man, the guy's not going to sell to you, man. You're too old. I'm like, you just do the introduction. Let me do the rest, And so I had kind of worked my magic in that way that, hey, kind of displace it. How I knew this guy, it's kind of like, hey, I met this guy just on the peripheral, like I delivered beer. My thing was, driving a beer truck. I would deliver beer to restaurants and to 7-Elevens and grocery stores and things like that. So you meet a whole bunch of different people that way. And that's how I just said, hey, that's how I did it. And never once did I had anybody turn it down not to sell it to me, and then when I buy it and then we end up, do X number of buys before we take the person off, during an interview, they were like, oh, I knew you were a cop. I knew you were a cop. And I'm like, well, why'd you sell to me then? So, they just want to, in the back of their mind, want to tell them that, they probably had something that didn't mesh, because of the age or whatever, but they didn't listen to it because they wanted the money.
Yeah.
And then greed gets them, and so, yeah, that's how I pulled it off. It was, and it's nerve wracking. You got an entourage of people in the prison. That's just like the surveillance thing I talked about. I think that's why it's so important. Because I would watch myself, because once you lock a couple people up and they do some serious jail time, about the time they're getting out, they're going to come look for you. And so I was like, kind of watch out your window, and so, but yeah, that's I hope that answers your question, man. I mean, it's
no, it definitely does, man. It's interesting that you say that, because I think in the intelligence world, I've heard that there's acronym MICE, right? And like, I think one of the first M is like money, right? Like people are just greedy over money. And even if they have that voice in the back of their head saying this guy could be a cop, but I need the money. So like, screw it. We'll do it anyway. That's interesting, man. And it's interesting that you mentioned, watching over your back after you locked a couple of people up, because that was going to be my next question is, did you in your personal life really kind of keep kind of a surveillance detection mindset when you were going around?
No, yeah. When you're in that unit, you're hyper vigilant all the time. I mean, family hated it, because I would never, and I still like this today. I'd never pull straight into a convenience store parking lot. I'll drive in slow, and I'll make sure it's not getting robbed or something like that, and leaving, when I had the family in the car, I would always look, I'd be checking my surroundings just to make sure that somebody wasn't following me. Luckily for me, I didn't shit in my playground. You know what I mean? I didn't live where I worked. So, so that it was, I had a pretty good, decent sized commute. So I was kind of, lucky I didn't run into the same shitheads that I'd locked up all the time. But when I did make that trip down in there, I made sure I was super, super vigilant, so, and then I looked out for myself, obviously, when I would go in. So
I'm sure you have to, man. It would be very nerve-wracking because you don't know if they have a weapon on them, right? Like you have no way of knowing.
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny you mentioned that too, because I had another situation where I was buying some cocaine off a guy. It was a first deal. He didn't want to buy it straight off of me, so I had to use the undercover, the confidential informant to buy it. So we met at a restaurant. He goes in and buys it. He buys it in the bar area of this restaurant, and he shorts me. So he comes back out. I throw, supposed to be an 8-ball of cocaine. I threw it up on the scale. It was light. It was like almost, half of what it was supposed to be. And this is unheard of, because they'll test you like this because they'll see if you're a cop, because the theory is cops won't turn it down. They're like, they'll buy it and be done with it. And I gave the dope back to the conventional informant. I said, go in there and tell him that you want the money back, that it's light. So he goes back in. He goes back in, and they get into a conversation, and he goes, basically the guy says, I'll go out and talk to him. But in the meanwhile, my cover team was in there having a beer, right? Because they knew where this was take place. They're in there, and the guy says, the bad guy admitted to the undercover officers that were in there covering me that he purposely ripped me off. And then they said, man, aren't you worried about getting your ass whipped or something? He goes, no, I never leave home without it. And he pats his waistband that, he had a gun in his waistband. And see, that never got back to me. So I'm in the middle of the parking lot, and the guy comes out, we're ready to fight. He's like, man, what's your problem? I said, make it right, man. Give me my money back or make it right. And so he didn't have enough cocaine, so he just whips out the money, and he gives me, he rips off, like $40 and gives it to me. But nobody told me that, hey, that guy had a gun in there that night. I think they were ready to take him down to see what was happening with our confrontation in the middle of this parking lot. But when I got back, I was like, holy shit, man. I think I probably would have done things a little differently had I known he had, was packing a gun in his waistband. So
Yeah, man.
we let the guy walk that day. We let him walk. We ended up taking him off later on, another deal. But
Can't be too careful on the street, man. That's what I always harp on, guys, is, getting into a street fight may seem like something, in your MMA class, right? Like, oh, I can handle it. But you never know, because on the street, they could have a knife, they could have a gun.
Yeah.
It's kind of a crapshoot. And you actually, I'm sure you've been in a couple of tussles yourself on the job.
Yeah. I mean, like nothing that's like really noteworthy, you know what I mean? But I was one of the guys that, because communication's everything. So I was one of those guys that if I knew that I was by myself, hey, I could talk my way out of getting a confrontation where I have to throw hands, you know what I mean?
Right.
So, there's a couple times it was inevitable, but usually we were a pretty large suburban area. We, usually had backup. So it wasn't much one-on-one stuff, it was, you had your boys to help you out, so yeah.
Are there any situations that you can remember where you went into it thinking, I'm not so sure about this?
Yeah. So it was about the Rodney King time, I guess. Of course, the race relations weren't good, and we were in pretty much an all-black neighborhood, and it got pretty bad. And it was just two of us in there, and we got surrounded by like 150, people that lived in the neighborhood there, and did not think we were going to make it out. You know what I mean? So we called some additional units, and then when they came, people started dispersing pretty quick, but it was just one of the things, like locking up a DWI. Somebody just locked them up for DWI right at the entrance to the subsidized housing complex, and got surrounded. It was not a good feeling,
That reminds me of what we see going on now, man. In a way, I mean, I'm sure that there's parallels that you could draw between back then and right now. But I mean, how do you feel about younger guys going into the police force now? Obviously, we need cops. We need as many as we can get. But what advice would you give to young guys going in the force right now?
Funny, man. My son just did it. My son just switched over from fire to PD, and I had that long conversation with him during the summer of love. During the June of 2020, when the cities were burning and cops were getting assaulted with and getting away with it. I'm like, man, is this what you want to do? And I try to steer them clear from it, because it's a totally different world these days in law enforcement, and you got to watch yourself, because you can end up in jail for doing your job. And so the younger generation, though, this is all they know, though. It's not like they knew policing back in my day. This is what they know. So this is their norm, if you will. So I guess they'll learn how to grow and thrive in that, in their norm. Whereas an old dog like me, I wouldn't make it in today's police world,
No way, man. Like, no way, dude. Honestly, like the old guard, man. Like, you guys were quick to throw hands if you needed to. You were quick to do what really needed to be done. And I think what really makes you guys different is you were tougher. I mean, straight up, you were tougher.
Yeah, I think that, and yeah. And I think society was different as well. They expected that if you ran your mouth off, or if you took a swing at an officer, that you're going to get what was deserved. But now it's like they think that you can get away with that, and officers should have to be able to take it. Like getting punched was part of the job. Well, getting punched, that was not in my job description. Or getting spit on wasn't in my job description. Getting spit on, we jokingly said, if you get spit on and the dude does not go to the hospital, there's something wrong. Yeah, you don't get, that's the most vile thing that can happen, or if you get bit, I don't know how many times, try to get bit, somebody try to bite you, or I've seen people get bit, and I'm like, man, that guy had been going to the dentist for sure, so, but
Yeah, it's some of the best hand-to-hand instructors I've ever had were old school cops, man, because they would always be in it. They'd always be getting it in tussles left and right. One of the best hand-to-hand instructors I had was Bill Wolf, and he was a Canadian RCMP guy. And the Canadians are crazy. Like, they're nice people, but they love to fight. It's not like that anymore, man. I really, even in the kind of the shadier areas, the body cams, the liability, the ability for citizens to sue cops now, I'm not sure. Is that a thing?
oh yeah, yeah. So there's been this big push, not just in this state but nationwide for what's the word I'm looking for? Qualified immunity to be taken away. So like if you injure somebody during the course of your work, like you make a lawful arrest and you end up breaking somebody's arm, that they can sue you, not just they can sue you personally, like come after your personal belongings, outside of being sued by, suing the county or the municipality that you work for, but they can actually come after you and your belongings. And that's just in, I say that, using that as an arrest, but say like somebody is involved in a car accident and you're trying to render first aid to them. And in the process, you injure them some more. Like you didn't know they had a cervical fracture or something, and you move them the wrong way, and then you cause more injury. They can come after you again, And so there's been a big push for that for police officers to lose that qualified immunity. And I think when you see that, if and when you see that happen, you're going to see a lot of people bow out and go, I'm done, because they're going to have to take on additional insurance, much like a doctor does for a malpractice suit or something like that. And, guys, we don't make enough money to pay an additional insurance policy to cover yourself and from being sued like that, So
yeah, no way. And that's absurd. And this draws into actually my next question, my next topic that I had, and this is circling into more of the conspiracy world, but it really isn't, is about, what do you think that it almost seems to me like there's a grand design behind things, man. Do you think that they want less cops on the street?
Again, I don't know, people first met me, I don't want to think I'm a crazy or something, but yeah, there is something insidious behind it all. It's got to be, if you think back about how they want to disarm the citizens, I think let me see if we'll get the quote all screwed up. I think it says, tyranny is when the people fear the government. Freedom is when the government fears the people.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they want. I think they want to take they want to take it so, we can't do an overthrow of it. You look at what's going on in Australia right now. I mean, they lost their gun rights, long ago, and now the government's locking them down left and right now with restrictions and stuff. So. Yeah, I think there's something insidious behind it. I think they want to keep things all fired up and keep and eventually, take your, one liberty at a time away from you. And, and I think when they don't have people to, you look at, where they've defunded the police, you just look no more than the crime rate there. The crime rate has skyrocketed and sometimes when the genie's out of the bottle, it's hard to get it back in. And, you see some of these places that have lost a foothold like that. And, the department I worked for, I kind of equate it to like Vietnam, where you work so hard to take a hill only to give it away, and I think that's what's happened in a lot of police departments across this nation, that they've done such a great job in their policing efforts, and then they've had to give it up, and they're going to basically have to start all over again.
You think there's a lot of cops out there who feel the same way, that are seeing what's going on and saying, this really isn't right?
Oh yeah. You look no further. You can see they're quitting in droves right now. Not only for the crap that happened pre-COVID, but now with the forced vaccines and things like that, people are like, man, I'm out of here. I don't need this. They're not going to, they're being asked to enforce some of these regulations, and they're like, I didn't sign up for that. I'm not the vaccine passport police. I'm not, and I think a lot of people say, I'm fed up with it, and then, I personally know a lot of people that have said that, when the time comes for them to come take your weapons, that hey, they're not, I'm not doing it, because a lot of them are just like us, they're like, pro 2A people, and like, no, so I don't know how the government would ever pull that off, but
it would have to be with foreign troops, man. There'd be no other way.
Yeah, I agree, and that's what I think, and that's are there some officers out there that will that would do it for the government? Absolutely, but I think that those are few and far between. I think a lot of people are like, you can stick it. I'm not doing that. So,
well, there's an interesting, our business partner DJ who helps run GFS, man. He actually just left the Federal Protective Services for the and I got to be careful what words I use here, but he wasn't going to take the thing, right? That medical procedure.
Right.
He he basically just said, I'm gone. You guys aren't going to make me do it. He had a bad experience with the anthrax vaccine in the military, so he wasn't about to do it. And a bunch of his other colleagues were in the same boat. They were just leaving. So it makes me think, man, honestly, that when you've only got the people there that will follow orders, no matter what those orders are, it makes it a lot easier for, whatever else to go whatever way you want, to catch my drift.
Right. But they're not going to have the numbers, though. You can rest easy that there's, I'd say 90% of law enforcement will politely bow out and go, you're on your own on that aspect. So, yeah. Matter of fact, I think the government fears. I think the government fears the prior police and the current police, because they know that we're basically the first line of defense. For when they come and make stupid orders like that.
Yeah.
And then our veterans.
That's what I was about to say too.
Yeah, and then our veterans. The veterans are the other ones. They're like, yeah. So.
Well, you got a bunch of guys who are leaving these things, right? Like whether it's police force, military, federal services, of protective service, DSS, whatever it is. These guys are all, what they're skilled in is violence when it comes down to it, right? And then you make them angry and you kick them out of their job against their will almost. It's like, well, how does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, they're gonna piss a lot of people off that they don't want pissed off.
Yeah. Dangerous, man. So I want to get into medical real quick, because you mentioned about rendering first aid to an accident scene or something like that. How big a part was actually rendering first aid was your job in law enforcement?
I mean, we not much for us, because you couldn't sling a dead cat without hitting a fire station. We had fire stations everywhere, So if we asked for medical, they were there like that. But I mean, there's times that you had to be proficient in basic first aid, doing CPR on somebody, stopping the bleed, things of that nature, because you just never know. I mean, there's been plenty of times where I have beat rescue to a scene and like, oh shit, I'm on my own, man. I gotta start doing CPR. And though you're there doing CPR by yourself for just a short minute before they're there and they can take over, but nonetheless, you still had to do it. And more importantly, it's great to know that stuff so you can transition it to it at home in case it happens to one of your loved ones, and that's why, we were going to talk about that. It's very important about the medical part. I think everybody needs to be prepped on that and have all those supplies on hand, like, a tourniquet to stop the bleed, and, be proficient in your CPR efforts and your, resuscitation, efforts and whatnot. So,
yeah, I have a friend who was in Vegas with his wife at the concert when that Mandalay Bay thing happened, and him and his buddy both jumped on top of their wives. They ended up not getting hit at all, but they after that ended up like rendering first aid to a bunch of different people there. They were just the first responders were so inundated, they were so overwhelmed that citizens were forced to try to control bleeding, right? And this guy was, taking off his belt and just trying to do whatever I don't think he was trained like officially in first aid, but he was trying to do whatever he could do to help. But these days, with all the terrorism that we're facing, with all the active shooters, with everything going on here in the homeland, man, I really do think that, in high school, you should be getting at least some kind of beacon course. They really should make it more of an effort to get this into the hands of the general population. It could save lives.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We, I don't know if we discussed it, but May 8th of 2006, we had a police station that was shot up. Bad guy came in the back of the parking lot, armed with an AK-47 and a sidearm, and he opened up and shot and eventually killed 2 officers in the back parking lot. And it went on. I don't know how long it lasted. It was probably 15 minutes of gunfire before one off-duty guy and one K-9 guy got together, and they tracked through the woods, and they found the guy in the back of the corner of the parking lot trying to reload, and they dispatched him. But they had to go render first aid. One officer they were both shot up pretty bad, and one died on the scene, and one died 7 days later because you obviously lost too much blood. And after you lose a certain amount of blood, I think it's a third of your blood, you'll never, even though you get the blood transfusion, you won't make it because of the shock. And unfortunately, both officers passed. But that those guys did a tremendous effort in rescuing both of those and rendering first aid until the helicopter could land and medevac them out and everything. But total chaotic scene, and those guys did all they could do to stop the bleed and whatnot. But so we talk about all the school shootings as prevalent as they are. Yeah, it's all the teachers should know how to do that stuff. And and we all should know how to do it, man. That's it. We should all know how to do it. So
yeah, no, exactly. And you actually you teach beacon, if I'm correct, right?
Do yes. Yeah.
So is it in your opinion, I mean, how long does a guy or girl who knows nothing about this, how long does it take to get them proficient enough that they could render some aid?
Oh, man, I'd say a couple hours. You can get somebody up and running, man, and actually do. And in our classes, we do teach that. We teach them how to pack a wound with gauze or with whatever they have to pack a wound to keep it from bleeding even more. We show them the points where we, apply the tourniquets, because the key thing is that, hey, it's just a temporary triage just to keep the blood from coming out. And then, they're going to get, more in-depth medical care, hopefully within minutes after you doing that. It's just basically just enough to stop the trauma, if you will.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but the beacon thing is I highly recommend it. I mean, it's what to do when after shooter starts. We teach how to barricade rooms. When you have to barricade, because B being barricade. The E in it is egress. C is communication. The most forgot thing during the whole thing is communication. Hey, let people know who's in the building. Call for help. Things of that nature. Oppose. We teach you how to oppose a shooter. If a shooter comes into a room, don't sit in a corner and die like a sitting duck. Hey, get up and fight. Throw things at the bad guy when he comes into the room. We teach how to disarm them. Do the high-low technique and pin them against the wall. And so that's the oppose part. And then notify. We have the notification part. Hey, where you have to start notifying authorities and getting some additional help there. So
I would assume when an active shooter is doing their thing, man, that when you make that call to 911, it would be probably pretty important that you give as accurate as a description as possible to what they look like, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. Give as much as you can, stay on the phone, and keep that line of communication open, so the officers, when they get there, know what's happening. And the way that the police respond to these incidents have changed over the years. The guy from Parkland, he kind of took a beating, if you will. I mean, if he truly hid, he needs to be, it's justified. But the rule of thumb is that you go in pairs. So you got to wait till the second officer gets in, then you go on a hunting mission. And the first two in go on a hunting mission. And then, whereas it used to be that we used to go and have to wait for four or five people to go and actually get into either the TY formation or our diamond formation and go hit the hallways to go find the guy. But those things changed back in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, where you decide, hey, you know what? We can't let the guy stay there and keep shooting while we keep waiting for people to get here. First two on scene go on a hunting mission. So you go into school, you sacrifice yourself and go look for the guy. It means stepping over dead bodies or people that are hurt. You do that and you keep on pushing down and until you find them. And then the rest of the people can come in and do a more, get in their formation and go start clearing rooms and hallways and things.
Yeah, it's, you saw that last one in Colorado where the guy with the rifle ended up, what was it? Rounds penetrated through a changing room where some young lady was hiding or something like that.
I'm not sure which one this is. I kind of keep my way, out of myself and watching the news, man.
Yeah. I only know because, on Instagram, I track a lot of the news for those of you guys out there watching who don't follow me on Instagram. If you have an Instagram, all our story is just news all day. So it's mostly headlines. I don't dive too deep into it. But from what I understand, out in Colorado, there was an active killer, they called it. Now, this person didn't have a gun. Apparently, they had like a locks in a sock or something. They were just beating people to death with these things. And there's a body cam video of this cop. He pulls up. He's the only one with an AR on scene. He goes to the front of the pile. The other guys were just armed with sidearms. And he sees the shooter. He yells to get down and stop. And they try to take cover behind a shelf or something. And he discharges 3 or 4 rounds. It was a good, clean shoot. But from what I understand, there was a young lady in the changing room behind the shooter who was hiding. And a few of those rounds actually struck her. I think she was okay. I think she survived. But I mean, Kev, in a situation with that, knowing, nothing about it other than what I just told you, that was still a justified shoot. How could he know that there was someone behind there, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you got to take care of business, man. You don't know what's going on. I mean, it's so chaotic and, yeah. I mean, that's the worst case scenario. I mean, that's not a good, it's not a good feeling going in there and knowing that you've got thin walls and stuff that you got to shoot, as backdrops and whatnot. So.
And you were actually involved with a shooting on your career. Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It, September 11th of 2007. So September 11th means, added on to an already shitty day adds, something else, another memory for me. Yeah, it was, I was a sergeant at the time. And my lieutenant came in early and worked the evening shift. We were working midnight shift. He had come in to cover evenings. And he sent me a message, about 3:00, telling me he was getting ready to go home and that, the streets were mine, if you will. So I said, okay. And we had a vehicle tampering that had just happened. And we were breaking down the perimeter of that because we didn't find the guys. And I heard some units in the northern part of the district call for, they got dispatched to a single car accident. And, I think it said something like, car northbound in the southbound lanes of, Sunrise Valley Road, single car accident, whatever. So I heard 2 units get dispatched. And then 10 minutes later, I hear, hey, one of the more proficient guys on the squad said, hey, I'm okay, but can you start me another unit? And I was thinking, well, you already have 2 units up there. It's like 3:45 in the morning. What's going on? So I started making my way up there. And so I pull up. This place was under construction. So I pull up in the turn lane. Thinking back now, it's probably not good tactics, but I was basically parallel with the car. The car is facing, like I said, northbound and the southbound lanes of this roadway. And I just pulled into the turn lane. I get out, shine my light in the car. And the car is a wreck. It's got all kinds of shit laying everywhere. And the officer points to his nose, like he shakes his head like he doesn't smell any alcohol. And he says, I think he's a 34, which meant that he thought he was a mental patient. But he was the driver was still sitting in a car. The backup officer had the taser out. I could see the taser on. I could see the laser bouncing off the pavement. And I said, "What's up with that?" And he says he's going to get out of the car and he's going to do something with his hands, and we're not going to like it. And I was like, "That's weird, you know." So anyway, I'm shining my light back in the car, and the bad guy looks at me and says, "What the fuck are you looking at?" And I said, "I'm looking for weapons, man." And I'm shining a car. I didn't see anything. The other officer's flashlights had gone dead. And so they said, "Hey, can we borrow your flashlight?" So I tossed him my flashlight. By the time I gave him the flashlight, tow truck pulls up because they had called for a wrecker. Tow truck pulls up, and by now they've been dealing with this guy for about 40 minutes. He won't get out of the car. I've been there for like 5 or 10. And I told him, I leaned in the car and I said, "Hey, tow truck's here. You're getting out of the car one way or the other. Either you're going to come out on your own or we're going to take you out of the car." So I walked around to the front of the car and got to the side of it. And the door was open. And he had 1 foot on the ground, 1 foot in the car. He had one hand on the steering wheel and one hand on his leg. And he was staring at the pavement. And I could see his chest heaving. You know, his chest was breathing heavy. And of course, automatically I said, "That's the fight or flight syndrome getting ready to kick in. He's either going to try to get away from us or he's going to fight us." And this was a Monday night, and it was raining. It was like a kind of drizzly out. It was a Monday night into a Tuesday. So I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go, you know, so the officer kept telling him, "Hey, sir, step out of the car, step out of the car." So finally he gets out of the car. And when he does, it was with no great urgency. He just like, I figure, okay, maybe he had a come to Jesus moment and he's going to give up because it was no escaping. He was going to have to go through me, the other officer, and there was actually 2 more officers on scene, one of which had a taser. I know there was no way he was going to win this battle. But he gets out of the car and he just reaches into his waistband and pulls his gun out, which I didn't know was a gun at the time, but the way he produced it, he came out, punched it out like he was going to stab the officer. So I thought it was a knife. But what happened, he got the gun up to the officer's face. The officer was able to knock the gun out from his face. The front sight actually cut him. He leg sweeps him. The whole time I heard the pop go off. The pop was the deployment of the taser. 1 dart hit, 1 dart missed, so it was ineffective. So, keep in mind, all this is happening in a matter of seconds. It's not, got a lot of detail, but it's all in a matter of like 2 seconds. I create distance. The car was it was a 3-lane road. He was in the number 1 lane. I backed up into the, between the number 2 and number 3 lane, and I drew down, and I saw it was a gun when he rolled over on trying to get on top of the officer and try to get the gun back at his head. And that's when I shot him, and the other officer shot 7 times, 6 hits, and he survived. But the officer was able to push him off, and so we rendered first aid. Called in, shots fired. Told me he had 1 suspect that was hit. The guy was not breathing well. You could hear it was gravelly breathing. I figured he had blood going into his lungs and whatnot. So the helicopter guy, we had a helicopter unit. Their primary mission is medical first and then police missions. So they called, they got on the radio and they gave us step-by-step instructions on how to do this, just in case, because, we were so amped up. They wanted to make sure that we were doing the right things, and, cover a sunken wound with a hard piece of, plastic or cardboard or something, and apply direct pressure to keep the sunken wound from getting any worse. And so we rendered first aid, and the guy made it, and he went in. It was a trial later on. It was a year later for the trial. He was found guilty of attempted capital murder of a police officer, use of a firearm, commission of a felony, possession of a firearm, possessing narcotics because he had cocaine on him, and possession of cocaine. So 51 years, 48 of it is to run consecutively, only 3 years were concurrent, and that was the 3 years he got for the possession of cocaine. So he's got to do 48 years. 27 years old, I think he was. So yeah, so he may even die in prison, but it was by the grace of God that I didn't watch a homicide that night. The officer had or the suspect had a 40 caliber Smith and Wesson, had one in the chamber, but no magazine in it. And that gun won't fire unless it has a magazine on it. That's one of the safety features of it. Not sure he knew that. Not sure if the magazine fell out when he pulled the gun out, because I heard the metallic sound, and I wasn't sure. I testified that I wasn't sure if it was the gun breaking across his belt buckle or him working the action, or as it is now, maybe he accidentally hit the magazine release and it was the magazine falling out, but I heard some kind of metal sound. And so, yeah, it was by the, just by that luck that didn't, because he obviously had to jump on us, with that, action's quicker than reaction. And yeah, so, but going back to the medical part, hey, you never know when it's going to have to come in handy. We had to, we had to make sure because it took, even with the helicopter, it took a little while they had to triage him first before they could load him up in the helicopter. And,
wow.
But, yeah, that was, it was pretty, you're talking about a single car accident, when you go to like a robbery or something, like you're expecting to meet somebody with a firearm, not on an accident, like it's a single car accident, so that was used a lot for the new recruits coming in. Hey, don't become complacent. Don't think that just because you're going to a single car accident, you're not going to be in a fight or in a gunfight. You just basically it reinforces never let your guard down.
That story is chock full of just pure luck for you guys, man. It really is.
Yeah.
And what I got from listening to that, honestly, is the amount of self-control that you guys had. You specifically, you sounded to me like you had a number of opportunities to shoot that would have been considered okay to shoot before you actually pulled the trigger there. And it really shows me how difficult the job is, and how much you guys don't want to go out there and hurt anybody. And then not only after that, you also rendered first aid to the guy that just tried to kill you, which obviously is part of your job. But
yeah,
it really shows, it really shows a lot of the good side of law enforcement. We get so much in the mainstream media about this cop did this and this and this and this, and you don't hear enough about, well, how much self-control does it take in a freaking situation like that, where you're watching a guy put a gun to your cop's head. Like it just shows how many times you had the opportunity before you actually had to do what you had to do. And
yeah. So
it's better.
Yeah. So I was telling you that, hey, from the time that he got out of the car till the time we shot it was just a matter of seconds. It was like, like I testified, I think I said, you go through your whole life, you get all this special training. I had a special training when I was on the bike team, when I was in narcotics, we do extra shooting because you're in those situations where you might have to do it. So we did more shooting, more firearms training, and more close quarters combat stuff than the regular officer does. So, but you go through your whole life, you're like, hey, am I ever going to use this? When it comes time for it, am I going to be able to pull this off? And I basically testified and I used the same analogy I'm using now. I said that question was answered in about 1.5 seconds, because I shot. And after the shooting, I, decocked my, at the firing line. Is the fire line ready? Fire line's ready. 2 rounds in 2 seconds. Boom, boom. Decock, holster, put your hood up on your. That's exactly what happened. It was muscle memory. I didn't shoot. I think I shot 4 times. The other guy shot 3. But nonetheless, it was decocked, holster, hood back. It was like all muscle memory stuff. And, the strangest things about this is that there was no ringing of the ears. All the gunshots sounded like pops, sounded like cap guns. Mm-hmm. Pop, pop, pop. No gunpowder smell. I did see one muzzle flash from the other officer's gun, but the human body is amazing, and the fact that it what it does to keep you alive, it protects your ears, the audio exclusion, you know, when your senses heighten, everything just tightens up, and it's just focused. It's mission one, that is to stay alive. And so everything, all this other stuff just shuts down, and it's just focused on staying alive. And it was pretty neat. I read a book by Lieutenant Dave Grossman, or he might be a colonel, I don't know. Thought I might have the book in my library back here behind me, but it was called On Combat. And he mentions that in there about I wish I would have read the book before I had the shooting, because it answered a lot of the questions I had. But I read that somebody gave me the book after I had the shooting, and I was like, oh, that's why that happened. That's why this happened. But he mentions that in there. The whole saying is that, hey, I shit my pants. Like, I'm so scared, I'm gonna shit my pants. Well, that actually happened to World War I and World War II soldiers and veterans that were there, that they weren't prepared, and that's part of the body shutting down. It's voiding everything in case you get shot, so you don't get that infection. And so it happens more than people care to know about, when in stressful situations like that. And the body just, Anyway, cool stuff, man. It's called On Combat. I think it's Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. That's what it is.
I would highly recommend that book. I actually haven't read it, but I've had a couple of guys come on and talk about it. And now that you mentioned, I'm going to have to check it out.
Yeah, he's got On Killing also. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. I met the guy. The guy's a very dynamic guy, man. It's a cool dude.
That's cool, man. I'm glad you brought up about the training, man. The aspect that you just reacted and you did it exactly how you would train, because that's guys like me, who have trained this stuff but never had to use it. You're right. It always runs through your mind, like, will I level up at the time where it needs to happen? But I guess you need to kind of fall back on, well, I've trained it, and that's all you can do, right? You train it, and hopefully it works.
That's it. And have that mindset of when it happens, not if it happens. I can't tell you how many times that, like I told you about going into like a 7-Eleven parking lot or a convenience store parking lot. On the job, okay, I run through my mind. Okay, I pull in, the clerk's being held at gunpoint. What am I going to do? And so if it ever happened, I was going to be ready for it. I had gone through that image every time I went in to get me a coffee at 2:00 in the morning or 3:00 in the morning. So I pity the poor fool that was sticking up a 7-Eleven at 3:00 in the morning, because but yeah, it's I highly recommend people going through that. You prepare. Like your worst fear, whatever your worst fear is, run through your mind, or how you're going to get out of it. So
you actually have you're a peer counselor for the police department.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what you do with that?
Yeah. So piggybacking on my shooting, part of going back to work is you had to go see a psychologist, right? So after your shooting, they take your gun. The most unpleasant thing in your, the whole shooting was how it was treated afterwards. They take your gun, you go back, you have to sit in the same clothes that you were in, wait for the crime scene to come up, take a photo of you like you're a bad guy, because you're a piece of evidence at this point. They feed you water, food, but natural body functions kick in, and you got to use the bathroom, but you can't wash your hands because they haven't done a gunshot residue test on you yet. And, it's just like, it was the most uncomfortable thing. And then part of it, you had to talk to a psychologist that night, and then you had to talk to a psychologist, days later, so you can get your gun back, so you can get back to the job. So things have changed a little bit about the way they do that now. The process is a little bit longer. It takes good 2 or 3 sleep cycles for everything to kick in, before you, really realize about how you're going to feel about it. But so long story short, my shooting, they wanted to send me to what they call a post-critical incident seminar. It was one of the first ones they had in the state of Virginia. It was right on the heels of Virginia Tech shooting. It was, a matter of fact, the one that I missed, the one I was supposed to go to with the rest of those that were involved in it, I couldn't go to. And that one, they had a lot of the Virginia Tech officers there from the tragic shooting they had there. But the year I went, you know, I didn't have any trauma from my shooting. I thought, hey, it was all clear. It was all good. It was just nice, clean shooting. Did what I was supposed to. Have felt no remorse. I've actually felt like I won the Super Bowl because, you know, we won, the bad guy lost, and it worked out the way it's supposed to. I had just lost my mom a year before, and I was having some trouble with that. And so they helped me out with that. I went there and it's like, hey, I'm good with my shooting, but I have a little trouble with the memory of watching my mom die. And so they helped me out with that. And I was like, wow, man, this is some really good stuff, you know, because it got me back on track. I was really having a hard go. Still, yeah, up until that point, I was, you know, not sleeping well because of it. And so I was like, hey, I'm going to get involved in this. I went back and I got involved in our local peer program. And our peer program kind of split off. We had a special group called the Shoot Team, which those of us involved in shootings, we would respond and be that person's peer that had to pull the trigger because we know what happened. We've been through it. We'd say, okay, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. This is going to happen. If it doesn't happen in that order, you call me and I will be there for you to help you see to it that it's done the right way. So then I figured, after I left the police department, I had got hooked up with the Virginia Law Enforcement Assistance Program. It's a nonprofit organization that helps these. They actually put on these post-critical incident seminars. They do 3 a year here in Virginia. So cool story. I became part of that, and that's been kind of rewarding. Probably was some of the most rewarding because you build friendships and bonds, and it's just, I don't know, that's some of, you're here for a reason. And I was trying to put forth, some like, hey, why did that tragedy happen to me? Or tragedy, it wasn't a tragedy we won, but why was I put in that position at that time in my life? And I think it was that, it was, I think, God's work for that. Hey, you're here to do other things for other people. So I'll tell you this little story. I won't mention any names, but when I was a supervisor of our driving facility in Fairfax, I had a guy come through from Arkansas. They came through to learn PIT trainer. They got trained on PIT, and then were taught how to take it back and train it. And this officer tells me, I hear him telling a story about how he watched one of his officers, his friends, get killed in an intersection while he was working a traffic accident. The officer was directing traffic, got hit by an intoxicated driver and was killed. And he saw it firsthand. And I asked him today, what'd your department do for you? And he said, they didn't do anything for me. He said, they made me, they said, if you want to go see a psychologist, that I had to go, he had to go do it through his own insurance plan. Wow. It's like, that is bullshit, man. Like I said, there's a lot of things wrong with the department I worked for, but some of the things that weren't was that they took care of people that went through something traumatic like that. They, on a side note, with my shooting, they were going to fly the helicopter out to pick my wife up, to fly her back to the station so she could be with me. And I'm like, no, that's good. We don't need to do that, So I'll fast forward. That officer from Arkansas calls me 8 months later. I was at work. He calls me at my work desk number. And he asked me if I had a minute. I said, I do. And he goes, hey, I'm in a dark place right now. He said, I go to bed at night. I pray that I don't wake up. I tell my wife and kids I don't love them. I'm just not in a good place. If I come out to you, can you put me in touch with the people that you talk to? And I said, absolutely. I said, why don't you give me a second? Let me call you right back. Made a phone call. Did him one better. I said, if you can wait until October, I said, I'll get you out here and you can go through the same thing I went through. So I brought him out here. He went through it. I was his roommate, his peer, mentor, if you will, that week. After the first day, he started crying on me, hugged me, and told me I saved his life. He goes, man, you saved my life. I said, Paul, I did nothing but make a phone call, man. He goes, no, you saved my life. You don't know it. And so I said, look, don't let Will's memory die in vain. I said, take this back to Arkansas, start the program. He did exactly that. He went back to Arkansas. Arkansas has the same program Virginia has. They only do one a year in July, but he's on year 5 now, year 5 or 6 of doing these things. So, I I can't help but thinking that, hey, you know, when life gives you lemons, man, make some lemonade with vodka in it, right? So I like to think that's what we did, man. I'm hoping that some officers' lives have been touched, and if there's any officers out there watching, I urge you to reach out. I'm going to fail probably in all my attempts of where we have them at. I know New York has a law enforcement assistance program, Kentucky, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Arkansas, Texas. There may have been some more added over the years that I don't know, but if you're in any of those states and you're, law enforcement, and some things are eating at you and you need some help, it doesn't have to be through the job, but if, some personal things are eating at you, you can go there and get some help. It's a 3-day conference and it's free of charge. And so doing God's work, man, hopefully, again, save some people's lives, they're thinking about doing the ultimate, evil, I guess. So
yeah, man, that's really touching, man, to be honest. I can tell you, just from my end, dude, first responders have kind of a culture of kind of, gung-ho, masculine, like nothing wrong with that, but, kind of a certain culture, right? And reaching out for help through your department, I know can be kind of for some departments, maybe kind of a thing, right? So to have somewhere where you can kind of go offline and reach out and say, hey, I'm struggling, like that's amazing, man. If you have like a link or anything that we can throw down here in the description, offline afterwards, just let me know. I'll definitely add that down in there. So.
Yeah, I can definitely give you Virginia's. I know that it's VALEAP.org.
Cool.
And then if you just type in, if you live in a state, say for instance, Kentucky, put Kentucky, Virginia, or Kentucky Law Enforcement Assistance Program, and I'm sure you'll be able to find, the link and whatnot. It's a great program, man. It's just peers, guys that have gone through similar incidents. I mean, there's backgrounds all of our backgrounds are different. Mine happened to be a shooting, but there's others that have lost a team member in a training accident, like a scuba drowning and stuff. So we have pretty much all the bases covered. I mean, if you can think of whatever kind of trauma you can think of that people had in their job, we've got it covered. So
I'm sick and tired of seeing guys who see some shit, right? Because cops, fire, EMS, we see some shit, man. And I'm sick and tired of seeing people turn to the booze. I'm sick of it, and too many do. And if you can find healthy outlets and healthy ways to talk about that and deal with it, like it should be dealt with, I think that's really awesome, man. It really is.
That's what it's ultimately what we're trying to do. If you touch one person's life, it's well worth it. Like my friend from Arkansas. I can think tangible. I know 4 times I actually saved somebody's life. You know what I mean? But that was one that kind of like you didn't know it until he told you. Yeah. So, yeah. But
cool, man.
It's good stuff, man.
So Kevin, where are you going from here, man? I mean, you're going to continue to be a driving instructor, becon instructor. But I mean, I know you're retired from law enforcement, but any plans for the future?
No, just keep my part-time job, what I'm doing, man. I enjoy it. It's just enough to, little extra income, and I enjoy what I'm doing because I enjoy the clientele we work with, so we have some military contracts. I have military background, kind of keep you in that same loop. I mean, there's quite a few folks that come through that are either, current law enforcement or prior law enforcement. So it kind of, I can stay in the loop without being in the heat,
Yeah. I think that's really important for guys, when you get out and you stop doing it, the adrenaline, man, like you get used to that. And I think you always are going to crave that, right? So to keep that up going somehow is, I think, really important.
Yeah. It's time for me to live vicariously through my son now. So,
yeah.
When I want to fix, I'll go down and get a ride along with him or something.
And he's a cool kid for wanting to do that, man, to be honest. Following his dad's footsteps and you're now fourth generation law enforcement. I can't blame him at all, to be honest. I would do the same thing. So
Yeah.
we're going to be rooting for him. And man, I appreciate you coming on. You got such an interesting background and such a good way with words, man. It's been a fucking great time. So thanks for coming on, dude.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I know we probably ran off on some of the other topics and whatnot, but you know, just so much, you know, for the other law enforcement people out there watching, they know it. I mean, it's, you know, I wish I would have sit down and actually write a book on it, you know, because some of the things that some of the stuff we've seen, you know, we weren't really meant to see, you know. Yeah. The average person doesn't get it, and you know, and I think sometimes now, you know, like we have those natural, your body, talking about your body saving you, you know, you push a lot of those things back, and you know, you don't really realize them until somebody brings up a similar incident, like my son when he was a fireman. You know, he was like, oh yeah, we had a struck pedestrian, you know, last night, and you know, he's telling me stories, and I was like, oh shit, man, I remember this one, but you know, and I wish I would have journalized it, you know, when I was in, so I could go back and like look at it later on in life and go, oh yeah, I remember that, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, we didn't get to talk about the CDU part of it, you know, the whole, that was a fiasco in itself. So maybe, you know, next time we'll talk about that, man.
I was actually about to ask you, because I'm seeing in the comments down here, man, guys are really having a good time with what we're talking about. So if you could come back on at another time, we would love to have you.
Yeah, man. Yeah, maybe we'll talk about modern day policing and you know, the perils, and then kind of chalk it up to what we had to deal with, like the politics involved, you know, because that, when I was down to President Bush's first inauguration, man, it was a total mess, you know, and I can only imagine that, you know. And I went to the U.S. Capitol about a month after the January 6th incident, you know, to go do some debriefs down there with some of the officers that were present that day, and yeah, it's that's a whole different story too, you know. They were just pawns in the game, so
Yeah, man. And, you know, I have literally like a couple of things here that we didn't get to talk about that I really wanted to get into. So
yeah,
for the guys and girls out there watching, listen, stand by, because we're going to definitely do a part 2 with Kevin and get in some other cool stuff. We'll talk more about the evasive driving for sure. We'll definitely talk more about his time, you know, in the inauguration and the other special units that he was involved in, and, you know, really dive in deep to some of the conspiracy theories that are actually like legitimate, and we'll have some good talks. So I'm going off to do some training in Missouri. I know we did a special thing last night about Operation Winter Forge, but when I get back from there, we'll get Kevin back on, assuming he has the time, and we'll do part 2. So
sounds good, brother. I appreciate you having me on, man. And that was good seeing you again, and yeah, like to see if you guys come back out, man.
Yeah, man, we're looking forward to it at some point. So hopefully, if we do, we'll link up and get in the same car, man.
Right on, man. We're using Chargers now, man. So,
oh yeah, dude.
Different beast, man. Different beast.
I'm looking forward to it. And Jen says hi too, by the way.
All right, I said hey. It was good working with her.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, listen, man. I'm gonna let you go. And I want all of you out there watching, all right, to please remember, until next time, that you are your first and last line of defense. Kevin and I will see you in part 2. Cheers, guys.